Welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because we're diving into a beautifully specific and honestly surprisingly deep piece of music history. Okay, I want you to picture this. Put yourself in the mindset of a really dedicated music fan living in the year 1976. You're hanging out in your local record store, flipping through the vinyl bins, and you can literally feel the musical landscape shifting all around you. Classic rock is getting much heavier, the very early, gritty whispers of punk are starting to bubble up in underground clubs, and the polished sheen of the 70s pop machine is working in absolute overdrive. And sitting right smack in the middle of all this chaos is Paul McCartney, leading his band, Wings. Now, at the time, McCartney was facing a massive wave of pushback. Music critics were relentlessly hounding him, accusing him of losing his edge after his time with the Beatles, basically claiming he was only capable of writing these lightweight, fluffy little tunes. And that specific tension? That is exactly what sets the stage for our source material today. Because we aren't just talking about some random hit on the radio, we are looking at a calculated, brilliant musical rebuttal. Our source introduces this era-defining moment with an incredibly strong thematic title, The Supremacy of Silly Love Songs. So we're going to unpack exactly what that supremacy means, the absolute musical genius hiding right beneath its surface, and the definitive chart data that backs it all up.
Okay, let's dive into this. What actually was the most successful song of 1976? I want you to really think about that for a second. If you look back at the heavy hitters of the mid-70s, it's incredibly easy to make some quick assumptions. You might assume some thumping, early disco anthem took the crown, something like Johnny Taylor's Disco Lady, which was literally dominating the airwaves at the time. Or, I don't know, perhaps you'd guess a massive arena rock track. Maybe something from Queen or Led Zeppelin definitively captured the era's sound. As fans, we kind of naturally expect the most culturally serious or groundbreaking tracks to win the numbers game. But the actual, definitive data, it completely surprises us. To really understand how this specific track topped the charts, you have to think of it kind of like a Trojan horse. Seriously. From the outside, it looked incredibly simple, bubbly, and lighthearted. Exactly the kind of standard pop fare you'd expect to just breeze right through the charts and disappear. But hiding inside that wooden horse, smuggled right beneath that catchy chorus, was an undeniable, complex musical architecture that completely took the entire industry by surprise. It wasn't just a hit, it was a brilliantly constructed siege on the pop charts.
So listen to how our source actually describes this phenomenon, this supremacy of silly love songs. I really want you to hear the weight of that word, supremacy. It's a heavy word, right? Critics originally just rolled their eyes at this track. When they saw the title, so many of them assumed it was McCartney just throwing in the towel and leaning into his worst habits. But the actual songwriting process behind this hit tells a completely different story. McCartney had literally been asked by a critic, why do you only write silly love songs? And instead of getting super defensive in the press, you know what he did? He went straight into the studio and wrote a literal, unapologetic defense of the silly love song. He leaned directly into the criticism. He crafted a melody and an arrangement so undeniably catchy and so meticulously produced that his biggest detractors had absolutely no choice but to listen to it on repeat. I mean, what an incredibly confident move. The critics might have groaned initially, sure, but everyday listeners immediately recognized the track for what it was. It wasn't just popular, it achieved absolute, undeniable dominance over the entire music landscape. It built this incredible tension between the cynics and the fans, and ultimately it achieved supreme status.
Now, what's really interesting about this number is just how definitive it is. We aren't just talking about a track peaking at #1 for a week or two and then totally fading away. According to our source data, this signifies the Billboard year-end #1. Let's look at the actual chart journey here, because it's wild. This track debuted on the Billboard Hot 100 in April of 1976. By late May, it had climbed all the way to the very top spot. And it didn't just visit, it practically moved in. It spent 5 non-consecutive weeks at #1 throughout the entire summer. And when you compare this level of commercial success to modern pop industry standards, the magnitude is just staggering. Think about it. Today, a song can hit #1 through passive streaming playlists, right? Or just being viral background audio on your phone. But in 1976, hitting the year-end #1 meant millions of individual people specifically chose to get in their cars, drive to a physical record store, and exchange their hard-earned cash for a physical 45 RPM vinyl single. It meant relentless active radio requests. It meant that when you tally up all the physical sales and all the active engagement for the entire 365 days of 1976, one single entity sat completely alone at the very top of the mountain.
And here is the climax of our data reveal. The officially documented most successful song of 1976 is by Wings, with their track quite literally titled Silly Love Songs. This is exactly what our source confirms. Wings captured that coveted Billboard year-end #1 spot. But why did it work so well? Well, let's look at the clever musical structure, specifically the bass line. In really simple terms, McCartney plays an incredibly driving, counter-melodic bass part that essentially acts as a second lead vocal. It's not just keeping the beat, it's this infectious, rhythmic groove that perfectly anchors sweeping orchestral strings, blaring horns, and a huge climax that features 3 distinct, complex vocal melodies just weaving all over each other. It is a total masterclass in arrangement. And fan reactions from the decade reflect this completely. You have to remember, 1976 was a complicated, post-Vietnam year. It was the American bicentennial. Everyday listeners weren't really looking for cynicism. They actively embraced silly love songs as a unifying, feel-good anthem. While the critics desperately wanted gritty realism, the fans just wanted joy, and McCartney delivered exactly that, in a package that was mathematically perfect. It effortlessly outperformed every single edgy rock anthem and heavy disco hit released that entire year.
So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Will the supremacy of silly love songs ever be challenged again? When we assess the song's enduring popularity today, it absolutely holds up. I mean, it is still studied by musicians right now as a textbook example of a flawless pop arrangement. And the true legacy of this source data is the incredible, undeniable irony of the whole thing. A song explicitly written as a cheeky rebuttal to critics who literally called a legendary songwriter silly, became the absolute mathematical victor of its entire era. Wings proved that this specific, timeless theme, when executed with real instrumental genius, could absolutely dominate the industry. It really makes you look at the power of a well-crafted pop song in a whole new light, doesn't it? In today's highly fragmented, algorithm-driven music landscape, we really have to wonder if a single, unifying track could ever achieve that level of universal, physical dominance ever again. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking great questions, keep looking beneath the surface of the charts, and I will see you next time.